When Lauren and Ben bought the house, it felt like a fresh start. Quiet cul-de-sac. No neighbors for 3 lots on either side. A 1970s ranch with just enough charm to feel nostalgic, but modern enough not to be a hassle. The floor plan was simple: 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a basement they planned to renovate into a home office. The first 2 weeks were uneventful, though Lauren admitted she kept losing track of time inside the house. She'd walk into a room and forget why. Hear things, not loud, but present, like the low hum of electricity in walls that weren't wired. But it was during an early spring cleaning day that things shifted. Lauren was wiping down the hallway walls when she noticed something odd. A seam in the wallpaper, small, hairline thin. It didn't match the rest of the wall. More curious than concerned, she pressed her palm flat against it and knocked gently. It was hollow. The hallway ended between their bedroom and the guest room, right where the blueprint showed a load-bearing wall. But this was empty space. Ben laughed it off, probably a patched-up closet or old drywall trick. But that night, Lauren dreamed of standing in the hallway and watching herself walk out of it. Lauren looked back at her, smiled, and said, "You forgot this room." They hired a contractor the following day. He took measurements, reviewed the blueprint, and scratched his head. "It shouldn't be possible," he said. "But according to these dimensions, there's about 6 feet of unaccounted-for space between your rooms." He brought in a scope camera, drilled a hole, and what came back was footage of a dark, windowless chamber. Rough walls, dust dancing in the beam, and one object, a chair, facing the corner. There was no door, no entrance. The house wasn't big enough to allow for secret hallways. And yet there it was, a full room, sitting quietly behind a sealed wall. They decided to break through. The sledgehammer hit with an unsettling echo, as if the space behind it hadn't been touched in decades. When the wall finally crumbled open, the smell hit them first. Not rot, not mold, but something metallic. Dry, like old coins. The room was small, perfectly square, walls made of unfinished concrete. The chair was still there, wooden, splintered at the edges. And beneath it, a long scratch in the floor, like it had been dragged in a circle over and over again. No signs of entry. No hinges, no secret doorways, just this space hidden in the heart of the house. Lauren couldn't sleep that night. She swore she heard the chair moving, not loudly, just a shift, a subtle scrape, like it had changed direction. By morning, she checked the room again. The chair was facing the doorway. She turned it back to the corner and left. By the 3rd night, she dreamed of someone sitting in the chair. A silhouette, no features, just the impression of something watching the wall, waiting, and every time she walked past the hallway, she could swear the air was colder. Not by much, but just enough. Then things escalated. Her phone began misbehaving. Voice memos would appear with no recordings. One of them, when played back, was nothing but static until the very end, when a soft voice whispered, "You shouldn't have opened it." Ben tried to reassure her. No EMF readings, no temperature drops, no signs of infestation or gas leaks. But when he stayed up one night to prove it, he fell asleep on the couch and woke up to the sound of the chair scraping slowly across concrete. When they checked the next morning, the chair was back in the corner, but now it was facing slightly to the side. Ben suggested sealing the room again. Maybe it had been hidden for a reason. Maybe someone had spent time in there, a relative with mental illness, a squatter, or worse. But when he tried to put up the drywall, the nails wouldn't go in. The wood rejected it. He said it felt like the house didn't want it sealed. Lauren, meanwhile, had started forgetting things. Whole hours lost. She'd find herself sitting on the floor outside the room, unable to explain why. She started hearing humming at night, an old lullaby, low and rhythmic. And the dreams became worse. In one of them, she saw the house as it once was. The walls were raw. The hallway stretched longer than it should. And that room? It was filled with chairs, all facing the same direction, all occupied. She said one of them looked like her. They left the house a week later. No dramatic exit, no violent haunting, just the slow realization that the house wasn't wrong. It was remembering. And that room? It wasn't added later. It had always been there, hidden, forgotten, like a memory you're not supposed to recall. They never went back. The home is still on the market. Realtor claims it's a fixer-upper with extra storage potential. The floor plan still shows 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, an unfinished basement, no mention of the room. When I first moved into the house, I thought the creaks were just old wood settling. It's what everyone says when they move into something with history. The real estate listing called it a rustic character home from the 70s, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, a basement that smelled like chalk and forgotten things. But I didn't mind. I just got out of a breakup and needed space. A place to breathe again. It started on the 3rd night. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, soft, almost too quiet to notice. Lena. I paused, turned off the faucet, listened. Nothing. It had come from the hallway, near the linen closet. But the house was silent now. I assumed it was in my head, a trick of exhaustion, or maybe a neighbor's voice echoing through the walls. I went to bed telling myself that. But the next night, it came again. Lena, this time from the vent. I leaned in, but there was only cold air. No sound. The weird part was, I hadn't told anyone my name. Not since I'd moved. No mail with it on the label, no social media check-ins, no new friends, not even a delivery. I've been careful about that. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Until the 3rd time. That night, the voice didn't just say my name. It said, Lena, why are you pretending you don't remember me? I didn't sleep after that. I set up my phone to record audio while I slept. I didn't expect anything. But when I checked it the next morning, there was a 10-second clip at 3:13 a.m. A low, breathy voice whispering. You lived here before. You just don't want to remember. I replayed it over and over. The voice didn't sound threatening, just disappointed, like it knew me, like it expected more. I went online, tried to look up past owners, but the house's records were fragmented. Everything before 1993 was just missing, like someone had wiped it. The real estate agent shrugged when I asked. That neighborhood's had a lot of turnover, she said. People don't stick around long. I started dreaming about staircases that didn't exist, windows I couldn't find during the day, a long hallway lined with closed doors. In the dream, I always knew which door to open, but I could never bring myself to touch the knob. Then things got worse. I come home and find things slightly moved. My mug on the wrong counter, the faucet dripping, a window cracked open even though I hadn't touched it. Once, I came back from the grocery store and the words, I miss you, were written in the condensation on the bathroom mirror. I hadn't taken a shower in 2 days. I called a contractor to check the ventilation system, hoping maybe the sound were coming from old pipes or poor insulation. He crawled through the attic, knocked on walls, and finally came back down pale-faced. Did you know there's a sealed room above your bedroom? He asked. There's no door to it. It's just there, like someone built the ceiling around it. A sealed room, above where I slept. He offered to break through the ceiling to access it. I told him no. That night, I heard the voice again. You asked to come back. You said you'd remember this time. I checked every vent, every closet, every inch of the house. Nothing. But when I opened the linen closet, there was something new, a narrow crack in the wood at the back. I hadn't noticed it before. It looked almost like a seam. I ran my hand along it. The panel gave a little. Soft. Hollow. There was a space behind it. I hesitated, then pried it open with a screwdriver. Behind it was a small, hidden chamber, maybe 4 feet wide. Inside, a child's chair, a broken music box, and a drawing. A girl with long, dark hair, standing in front of the very house I was in. A name scrawled underneath in shaky crayon. Lena. I staggered back. I hadn't lived here before. I would have remembered, wouldn't I? But I started seeing flashes. A hallway. That music box playing. My mother calling me from the top of the stairs. A fall. A scream. Darkness. The house wasn't haunted. It remembered me. I wasn't its new owner. I was coming home. That's when the dreams changed. The door I always avoided in the hallway. I opened it. Inside was the sealed room, with a bed, a broken doll, and bloodstains on the ceiling. I woke up gasping, but I wasn't in bed. I was in the attic, on the floor, covered in dust, and on the wall, written in something dark, were the words, "Thank you for remembering." When we bought the house, we were told the attic had been sealed shut decades ago. No pull string, no styrkas, no access. It wasn't a selling point, but but it wasn't a deal breaker either. We were a young couple, eager for space and quiet. The place had charm: creaky floorboards, antique fixtures, and that warm, golden light that filters through old windows like a memory. We didn't care about the attic until it started caring about us. It began on the third night. We were asleep when we heard the first sound, a soft, deliberate scrape, like wood against wood, directly above our bedroom. We sat up, listened. Nothing. Mice probably, or the house settling. But the sound came back the next night, then the next. Same time, same pattern. A slow, dragging scrape, followed by silence so complete it made our ears ring. By the fifth night, my partner had moved to the guest room, said the dreams were too vivid, said the ceiling breathed while they slept. I stayed behind, not to be brave, to prove something, that old houses make noise, and we were being irrational. That night, I slept with the lamp on. Around 2:43 a.m., the scraping returned. Only this time, it didn't stop. It dragged for almost a minute, then came a thump. A dull, heavy sound, like something dropped from a low height. I froze, eyes locked on the ceiling, waiting. Then came the creaking, not from above, from down the hall. I got up, heart jackhammering. The hallway was dark, still, but colder than it should have been. That's when I noticed the air vent on the ceiling, just outside the attic hatch. It was open, swinging slightly, and beneath it, a faint trail. Dust displaced, like something had landed and walked away. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. We called an inspector the next morning. He brought a ladder, tools, and a tired sense of professionalism. After an hour, he came back down pale. He said the attic was empty, mostly just old boards, no pests, but he refused to go back up. Said there was writing on the beams, something carved deep into the wood. We went up ourselves the next day. It wasn't writing. It was tally marks, hundreds of them, deep gouges covering every rafter. And in the far corner, a small wooden box. Inside, a bundle of black hair tied with thread, a porcelain eye, and a folded piece of paper. It simply read, "Stay downstairs." We didn't touch anything, didn't take photos. We nailed the hatch shut that afternoon, but it didn't stop. Over the next week, we found more signs. Tiny footprints in the dust along the baseboards. A deadbolt we hadn't locked, clicked shut from the inside. The smell of old wood and something warm breathing in the vents. One morning, my partner screamed from the laundry room. I ran in and saw it instantly. The ceiling tile had been pushed aside. Something had dropped down into the wall. Behind the dryer, we found scratches, claw marks, 5 parallel lines, as if something dragged its fingers along the drywall. Slowly, methodically. We left the house for a few days, stayed with family, tried to rationalize. When we returned, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your chest like the house is listening. That night, I dreamed of the attic. Except it wasn't an attic. It was a throat, narrow, pulsing, with walls that whispered. At the far end, a figure stood, featureless, its limbs too long, too smooth, like something carved by forgetting. It raised one hand and pointed straight at me. I woke up choking. In the hallway, the air vent was open again. We moved out the next day. A few weeks later, we received a letter. No return address. Inside was a photograph, a grainy black and white image, taken from the attic. It showed our bedroom, from directly above the bed. On the back, someone had written, "Thanks for letting me out." They bought the house in winter, cold, quiet, unassuming. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, built in 1971. And oddly, every single room had its own mirror. Not just in the usual places. There were mirrors behind doors, mirrors set into closet panels. One in the hallway just outside the master bedroom, bolted directly into the wall, as if it had always been there. The previous owner had passed away, alone, after decades of living in the house. The realtor mentioned that the woman had been obsessed with reflection. A collector, maybe harmless. The couple moved in without issue. It wasn't until the second night that things felt off. Claire was brushing her teeth when she noticed it. Her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. She froze, watched. The image followed her again. Everything normal. Maybe she imagined it. But the next morning, in the hall mirror, it was James who noticed something. He stood adjusting his tie when he saw Claire's reflection walk behind him. The problem? Claire was still in bed. He turned quickly. Nothing. Just a quiet hallway. Still air. A faint draft from the vent. They laughed it off. Until it happened again. This time, Claire stood in front of the bedroom mirror and noticed her reflection was smiling. Slightly. Barely. But enough. She wasn't smiling. She stepped closer. So did the reflection. She tilted her head. The reflection tilted a little too far. The neck seemed looser. Claire didn't tell James. Not yet. She didn't want to seem paranoid. That night, while brushing his teeth, James saw something that would end the silence. He bent to rinse and saw his reflection staring directly at him. Head tilted up, watching, but he hadn't looked up yet. When he did, it moved too fast, snapping into place like a bad jump cut. James stumbled back, water still dripping from his mouth. He finally told Claire, and she, hesitatingly, admitted she'd seen something too. From that point on, the mirrors became unpredictable. Some showed them younger, some older. One bathroom mirror made them look tired, sickly, with gray bags under the eyes, even after full nights of sleep. One mirror in the spare bedroom showed a figure standing between them, a tall silhouette just behind their shoulders. No one was there when they turned. They started covering the mirrors. Sheets, towels, tape around the edges. But the house resisted. Every morning, some coverings were found on the floor. Some mirrors were uncovered. One was completely clean, despite having been smudged the night before. Claire left a message in lipstick on one mirror. Do not come back. By morning, it was wiped clean. No matter what they did, the mirrors refused to leave them alone. And then came a night James woke up screaming. He said he'd seen himself in a dream. Only, it wasn't a dream. He described walking through the hallway, seeing himself in every mirror, each version slightly wrong. One had no eyes. One mouthed things silently. One pointed past him. James said he followed the pointing one into the master bathroom. The mirror there was darker than usual, like looking into deep water. He said the last thing he saw was himself inside the mirror, staring back at his own sleeping body. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, all the mirrors covered except one, the one above the fireplace. She couldn't remember uncovering it. In it, she saw James standing behind her. He was upstairs. She didn't turn around, just watched as the mirror James leaned in close, mouth near her ear, and said something she didn't hear. His mouth didn't move right. It was like watching old footage a few frames off. And then he walked into the frame, into the mirror, and disappeared. She turned. No one behind her. Just a cold, breathless silence. The next day, James was gone. His clothes remained. His wallet. His phone. No signs of struggle. Police were called. No leads. Claire said nothing about the mirrors. But she knew. She could still see him. In the hallway mirror, 3 days later, just standing there, inside it, eyes wide. He didn't blink. We bought the house 6 months after my wife died. I know how that sounds. And maybe that should have been my first warning, trying to start over before the foundation of my grief had even settled. But after the accident, I couldn't sleep in the old place. Every creak of the floorboards, every scent that reminded me of her shampoo or the laundry detergent she used, it all felt like a haunted museum. The new house was remote, wooded, quiet. It was supposed to be a place to reset. Instead, it became a mouth. The house was strange from the beginning. Not bad, not in any obvious way, but too perfect, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The first time it happened, I was unpacking in the master bedroom. A faint sound brushed the edge of my awareness, like someone calling my name from another room. I froze, then told myself it was just the wind moving through the vents. But that night, while lying in bed, I heard it again. My name, whispered, and not just whispered, spoke in her voice. My wife's voice. I sat up so fast I nearly fell off the bed. I called out, trembling. Nothing. No reply. No creaking footsteps. No movement at all. Just the stillness of the house pressing in, thick and heavy. I barely slept. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. A mix of exhaustion and wishful thinking. Maybe a leftover echo from some voicemail or video I played. I even checked my phone. Nothing. But the next night, it happened again. Only this time, she said something new. "Why did you leave me?" That's what the voice whispered. Low, regretful, full of pain. I didn't know what to think. I hadn't left her. She was gone, taken by a car accident on a rainy highway I'll never stop replaying in my head. But now the walls of this house, the clean, newly painted walls, were speaking to me in her voice. At first, I wondered if I was losing my mind. Grief does strange things. I even considered calling a therapist. But then something changed that made it impossible to explain away. The voice began answering questions. It was a quiet Thursday night. I was in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, staring at the last untouched box from the move. I whispered, "What do you want?" And the voice replied, "You." But it didn't come from a device. It came from the wall beside the fridge, as if it were being exhaled from the drywall. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. But when I backed away, I heard it again. "You let me die." I started to notice patterns. The voice always came after sunset. It was stronger in the kitchen and the bedroom, places we used to spend the most time. And it always used her words. Not just her voice. Her phrases. Things she used to say, twisted into something colder, more accusing. I stopped sleeping altogether. One night, I lost control. I screamed at the wall, begged it to stop. I punched the plaster until my knuckles bled. The silence that followed was worse than the whispers, until I heard a soft laugh. Her laugh, and then the whisper again. "You replaced me." I froze, because here's the part one hadn't told anyone. A week earlier, I had started seeing someone new. Nothing serious, just coffee, a walk in the park, the beginning of something that felt normal. Something human. We hadn't even kissed. But now the house knew. The voice knew. And it was angry. That night, I woke to the smell of her perfume. The exact brand, jasmine, cedarwood, and something faintly metallic. It was overwhelming, like someone had smashed a bottle of it against the wall. Then I heard the humming. My wife used to hum while brushing her hair. A soft, broken melody from a lullaby neither of us could remember the lyrics to. Now it was coming from inside the walls. I tried to move out the next morning, but the front door wouldn't open. I turned the knob. It wouldn't budge. The windows wouldn't shatter. My phone had no signal. No internet. It was like the house had severed me from the outside world. Then the lights went out, and the walls began to whisper continuously. Not just my name, but fragments of memories. Things only she would know. "Remember our honeymoon? You said forever. Why did you let go?" The voice grew louder, angrier. No longer whispers, screams muffled by plaster and insulation. "Why didn't you save me?" I ran to the basement. Only one place left the whispers hadn't reached. Or so I thought. I found a breaker box, yanked it open. But instead of wires, there was something else. A mouth. A gaping, pulsing wound in the wall. Human teeth. Vet Brett. And from it came her voice. "Calm. Clear. Stay. We can be together again." I don't remember what happened next. I woke up on the floor hours later, covered in dust and blood that wasn't mine. The door was unlocked. I ran. I never went back. But sometimes when I walk past reflective glass, I swear I see her standing behind me. Just for a moment. Smiling. I try to forget the house. I try to forget what it said. But sometimes when the wind passes through my apartment vents just right, I swear I can still hear it. Her voice, calling me back. They bought the house in late October. It was a fixer-upper, Victorian, with sun-bleached siding and a spindly iron gate that always stuck when it rained. But the price was unbeatable, and the neighborhood had a charm that felt frozen in time. Leaf piles on sidewalks, flickering lamplights, children's bikes left in yards without worry. Hannah didn't like the basement from the beginning. It had a low ceiling and strange temperature changes, hot and muggy in the corners, bitter cold in the center. The previous owners had left behind old metal shelving and a pile of heavy velvet curtains stacked neatly in one corner. But what stuck out most was the door at the far end. It was flush against the wall, tall, narrow, a dull green with paint chipped at the edges. At first, they assumed it led to a utility room. But the odd part was the lock. There was no way to open it from the outside. Only a handle. No que llore. But there was a bolt. On the inside, a door that could only be locked by whoever or whatever was inside it. They tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. Not nailed shut, not sealed, just uncooperative. Tom joked it was probably just warped wood. "Old houses are weird," he said. "You'll get used to it." They moved in fully 2 weeks later. That same night, Hannah dreamed she was trapped in the basement. Not scared, just confused. In the dream, the door was open, just a crack, enough to see a sliver of darkness that seemed deeper than the space should allow. She heard something breathing behind it, slow, patient, listening. When she woke up, the basement light was on. Tom swore he didn't go down there. They stopped storing anything in the basement after that. Even the laundry was moved upstairs. But things still found their way down. First, it was a family photo, gone from the hallway, found lying face down on the basement steps. Then a house key, one they hadn't used yet. Tom had left it on the kitchen counter. He found it resting in front of the green door, neatly placed like someone had gently set it there. By the third week, they heard movement. Not rats, not pipes. It sounded like someone shifting their weight behind the door. A chair scraping, a breath catching, always in the early hours of the morning. One night, Hannah sat on the top basement stair, staring down into the dark, holding her phone with the flashlight on. The green door was still shut, still locked, still harmless. But as she turned to go back up, she heard the soft metallic slide of the bolt locking itself from the inside. She didn't sleep that night. They called a locksmith. The man was polite but skeptical until he saw the lock. "That's not modern hardware," he said. "That's a manual deadbolt, turn latch style. Only opens from one side." He tried for nearly an hour. Nothing worked. Finally, he gave a half laugh and said, "Maybe it wants to stay closed." That night, Tom woke to a sound like nails dragging across stone. It came from directly below their bed. The basement. When he checked, the green door was open, just an inch. But there was no darkness behind it, just fog. Thick, swirling gray like something halfway between smoke and mist. He shut it. Hard. The bolt slid into place again. On its own. After that, the house started changing. The upstairs windows began to frost over on the inside. Hannah's toothbrush disappeared. Returned 2 days later with a single hair, long, black, wrapped around the handle. Neither of them had black hair. The smell of soil began creeping through the vents. Damp, freshly dug. They brought in a contractor to tear the door down. He came at noon. By 1, he was gone. Left his tools behind. His truck idled at the curb for 10 minutes before it finally pulled away. He never returned their calls. That evening, the green door was open again. The bolt this time was missing. Tom and Hannah slept in their car that night. The next day, they packed to leave. But when Tom went to grab their paperwork from the office, he didn't come back. Hannah found him in the basement, standing in front of the door. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wide, but empty, like he was watching something far off in the distance. The door was open. The fog was back, and there were faint outlines inside it. Figures, shapes, not quite human. Too tall, too thin. Their mouths were open, but they weren't speaking. They were mouthing her name. Tom took a step forward. Hannah screamed, and the door slammed shut. She threw herself at it, screamed until her throat gave out. No answer. But then, the bolt slid into place again. From the inside, the house is still for sale. The listing doesn't mention the basement anymore. And when prospective buyers come for a tour, they're politely told to stay upstairs. And if someone does ask about the green door, the realtor simply says, that room is no longer part of the property. When I bought the house, it felt like fate. A lonely, 2-story colonial tucked behind rows of skeletal trees, far from town, surrounded by quiet. Too quiet. The realtor called it a perfect little fixer-upper for someone looking to get away. I didn't ask why the last owners left so suddenly. The first night was still. Not peaceful, still. Like the air was holding its breath. It wasn't until the third day that I found the letters. They were inside a crawl space in the upstairs hallway. A compartment I only discovered because the wooden floor creaked differently in that spot. Under a loose board, there was a weathered shoebox sealed in plastic. Inside, 13 envelopes, each one yellowed with age, each one stamped and postmarked in 1985. Each one addressed to me. Full name, my current handwriting. But the chilling part? I wasn't born until 1994. I thought it was a joke, some weird coincidence. A previous owner with the same name, maybe, but when I opened the first letter, my hands went cold. The writing was mine. It wasn't a perfect match, sloppier, older, maybe shakier, but the tone, the way the sentences curved around thoughts I hadn't yet lived through. It was me. If you're reading this, it means the house let you in again. Good. We don't have much time. Listen closely. This place is not what it seems. That was all the first letter said. The second was longer. You'll start hearing footsteps above your bedroom around the fourth night. Don't acknowledge them. The moment you do, it will know you hear it, and then it will speak. I stopped reading there. That night, I lay awake for hours, the silence thick as fog. And just as the clock blinked 3:13 a.m., footsteps, directly overhead, measured, slow, as if whoever, whatever, was up there knew I was awake. I didn't look. I didn't speak. I just stared at the ceiling and counted every step until the sound faded. The next morning, I tore open every letter in a panic. Each one described events that hadn't happened yet, all of them warning me in detail. Precise, intimate warnings. The sixth letter mentioned a knock at the back door just before sunrise. It would be a girl with no shoes, standing in the frost, asking to come in. She will look human. She is not. If you invite her in, she won't leave. Ever. I stayed up, watching. At 5:04 a.m., I heard it. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. But I saw her through the window. Pale. Hair matted. Eyes too wide. She stood there for 37 minutes. The letters kept escalating. By the 9th, they were begging me to burn the house. To leave. To never look back. But something in me didn't want to. Not out of bravery. Not even out of fear. It was curiosity. Like I was reading a story that wasn't finished yet, and the final page was still hidden somewhere in these walls. That's when the dreams started. In one, I was writing a letter to myself in the exact same ink on the exact same paper. The words flowed out of me like water from a broken pipe. You don't remember writing this because the house takes that part of you. You'll understand once you've been here long enough. You'll forget why you came. You'll forget who you were before. I woke up clutching a 14th envelope. It wasn't postmarked. The ink was still wet. I hadn't written it, but I also had. I tried to leave that day. Packed a bag, started the car. But the forest had changed. The road out twisted in the wrong direction, looping back to the house no matter which turn I took. The house had closed in. It wasn't letting go. I spent the next week mapping every room, tapping every wall, ripping up floorboards. There had to be a logic to it. A pattern. A key, and then I found the mirror, hidden behind a wardrobe in the guest room. A massive, arched antique mirror with strange lettering etched into the glass. Words I couldn't read at first, but that slowly rearranged themselves as I stared. You wrote the letters. You sent them back. It wasn't possible. And yet, the dates, the paper, the ink, it all matched the supplies I found in the basement workshop. My own handwriting, looping in on itself. Memory swallowed by some parasitic architecture. This wasn't a haunting. It was a loop. A living timeline that folded inward like paper, trapping me in a house where cause and effect meant nothing. I hadn't found the letters. I'd written them, and I would again. We moved into the house in October, just in time for the leaves to turn and the nights to grow longer. It was perfect. Suburban. Quiet. The kind of neighborhood where the most dramatic thing that ever happened was a squirrel chewing through a power line. Or so we thought. On our second morning there, we found a package on the doorstep. No big deal, right? Except the name on the label wasn't ours. To the Marnes family. 213 Larkspur Lane. Our address was correct, but neither of us had ever heard of a Marnes family. I figured it was a delivery error. Maybe someone forgot to update their shipping info. The box was small, light, wrapped in brown paper with handwriting that looked old. Ink pen old. We asked the realtor. She swore up and down that no one by that name had ever lived there. Public records backed her up. The house had been built in '98, sold twice. Both previous owners with completely different last names. Nothing unusual. We put the box in the closet. Forgot about it. Until the next one came. Then another. Then 4 more. Every single one, addressed to the Marnes family. I finally opened one. Inside was a glass jar filled with small, hand-carved wooden dolls. Each had tiny initials carved into their backs. AM, LM, CM. There were 5 in total. No note, no branding. Just those dolls wrapped in old, yellowed cloth. I didn't tell my partner. Something about it felt violating, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the hallway of our house, staring at the front door. The door opened on its own. A woman stepped in, holding a box. Her eyes were clouded over. Her mouth never moved, but I heard her say, "We live here. We always have." I woke up with a nosebleed. I don't get nosebleeds. The boxes kept coming, always in 2s or 3s, always handwritten. Sometimes we'd find them even if we didn't hear the doorbell. Once one was sitting on the dining table in the morning, inside the house. We installed cameras. Nothing showed up, just static between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m. One night, I finally asked my partner if they'd ever opened one of the boxes. They paused. They weren't for us. There was a strange tone in their voice. Detached, not scared, almost reverent. I opened more boxes. One had a child drawing of a house that looked exactly like ours, only it was drawn in crayon with 5 stick figures out front. One of them was scribbled out violently in red. Another box had a cassette tape. I bought a player off eBay just to listen. The tape was mostly static. Then a voice, childlike, whispering, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then silence. Then, where did Daddy go? I started to dream in other people's memories, waking up with strange names in my mouth. I'd walk into rooms and forget why I was there, only to remember moments later that I wasn't the one who had walked in. One evening, we found handprints on the inside of the bedroom mirror. Small ones, like a child's. Neither of us had touched it. And then, just like that, the packages stopped. No more boxes. No more static. No more dreams. We thought it was over, until we got an envelope. No return address. Just a single photograph inside. A black and white image of a family standing in front of our house. 2 adults. 3 kids. Their faces were blurred, but the caption on the back was clear. The Marnes, 1961. But that was impossible. This house didn't exist in 1961. It wasn't even built until 1998. There was nothing on this land before that, just empty lots and overgrown brush. Or so we were told. But after that envelope, things started changing. Subtle at first. Light switches in different places. A window that hadn't been there before. The hallway 1 step longer than it should have been. It's like the house was remembering them. Or maybe it never forgot. We left 2 weeks ago. Broke the lease. Moved across town. But every few days, we find something on our new doorstep. A box. No return address. Handwritten label. To the Marnes family. We moved into the house on a Tuesday. It was quiet, tucked behind a line of tall pines on a narrow rural road. Just the kind of isolation we wanted. My wife and I had been city people our whole lives, but after she lost her job and I began working remotely, we needed change. The countryside was cheaper, quieter, supposedly safer. The house was old, built in the 60s, but well kept. Nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small basement, and a cozy little kitchen with vintage green tile that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. Quirky, we called it. Charming. Our golden retriever, Max, was the first to act strange. He'd been calm throughout the entire move. Curious, happy, tail wagging like usual. But the moment he crossed the threshold, he froze. Not with fear, more like hesitation. He stood in the entryway, staring toward the kitchen, and let out a low whimper. "Go on," I said, nudging him gently. He wouldn't budge. He sniffed the air, then turned in a slow circle and sat down. Not facing us, facing the hallway that led to the kitchen. Watching it, I figured it was just stress. New environments can throw animals off, right? But Max never got used to that kitchen. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after weeks of us settling in. Every time we tried to coax him toward it, he'd dig in his heels and growl. A low, guttural sound we'd never heard from him before. His ears would go flat, and he'd back away, trembling. We stopped trying. He'd walk with us through every room of the house, except that one. The strange part was nothing fell off in the kitchen. Not at first. It was bright, always bathed in sunlight in the mornings. There was a sweet, almost nostalgic smell like cinnamon and old wood. The kind of place you'd expect to find warm bread cooling on the counter, not something evil. Still, the longer we stayed, the more we began noticing shifts. Lights flickering, the fridge humming at odd frequencies. Occasionally, I'd walk in and the faucet would be dripping. Just one drop, over and over. It would stop on its own. Once I was sitting at the table, typing up emails when I heard it. A breath, right next to my ear. Not wind, not the house settling. A slow, raspy inhale, as if someone was leaning in, watching me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty kitchen. And Max, sitting at the end of the hall, still watching. Things escalated quickly after that. The first night we heard the footsteps, my wife was already asleep. I'd stayed up reading on the couch, the soft creak of old pages and rain on the windows lulling me into a trance. Then footsteps, light, bare, walking across the kitchen floor. I paused, waited, another step, then another, like someone was pacing in small, deliberate circles. I checked the door. Locked. I stood, heart pounding, grabbed a flashlight, thinking maybe an animal had gotten in. A raccoon. Maybe. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, the sound stopped. Nothing moved. No footprints. No sign of entry. Just that smell. Stronger now. Like damp earth and rotting fruit. Barely masked by the faint scent of cinnamon. And silence. Until I turned off the light. Then, just as I reached the hallway, I heard it again. A whisper this time. Words I couldn't make out. But close. Too close. My wife dismissed it as stress. Said I was overtired, hearing things. But that same night, she dreamed of someone standing at the foot of our bed. She couldn't see the face, but the figure's hands were wet, dripping onto the floor. She woke up to find the carpet cold and damp, like someone had walked through it barefoot. After that, neither of us slept well. Max grew more distant. He wouldn't even sleep in our room anymore. Just stayed near the stairs, staring down the hallway, guarding it. We decided to do some digging. The house had no major red flags. No history of violent crime. Just a single mention on a local forum. Someone said they'd lived here years ago. That the house had been quiet, except for the kitchen. We reached out. The man who replied was hesitant. Said his mother had died here. Nothing suspicious, just a stroke. But it happened in the kitchen. She collapsed mid-step, holding a tray of cookies she was baking for her grandchildren. He mentioned something strange, though, that ever since she passed, appliances would act on their own. Phones ringing with no one on the line. Food spoiling overnight. He laughed it off at the time. Said maybe she never really left. The final straw came 3 weeks later. I woke up around 3 a.m., parched, and decided to get a glass of water. Max followed me to the hallway, but stopped short, as always. I walked into the kitchen, still half asleep, and reached for the faucet. The water wouldn't run. Instead, the drain began to gurgle. Slowly, black water bubbled up, thick and sludgy. The smell was unbearable, like mold and iron. I backed away, choking. Then the kitchen lights flickered once, twice, and I saw her, reflected in the dark window above the sink. A woman, face swollen, lips blue, eyes wide and bloodshot. Her mouth moved, but there was no sound, until the glass in my hand shattered. Max barked, loud, frantic, and the lights snapped back to normal. The reflection was gone. So was the black water. Just a clean sink, a cracked glass, and a dog trembling beside me, barking into an empty room. We moved out a week later. No final confrontación. No climactic exorcism. Just a slow, steady unraveling of sanity. Max still won't walk past kitchens, even in our new place. He eyes them from a distance, tail low, ears pinned, as if he's waiting for something that hasn't arrived yet. Sometimes I wonder if she followed us. If whatever spirit lingered in that house saw something in us, something it liked. Or maybe she was never a ghost at all. Maybe some houses aren't haunted by people. Maybe they're haunted by moments. The final breath, the sudden fall, the pain that never got resolved. And maybe, just maybe, that moment replays itself over and over until someone is unlucky enough to witness it. We moved into the new house in early October. It was one of those off-season deals. A 3-bedroom colonial tucked just beyond a tree line, sitting on a property that hadn't been touched in decades. Quiet, modest, and somehow untouched by the decay of time. The realtor called it a blank slate. We called it a fresh start. My wife, Marin, was in love with the idea of extra space. One room for an office, one for guests. Maybe a nursery someday. We joked about filling it with fake plants and forgotten hobbies. It was just the two of us after all. So we were surprised, disturbed, even when on our first morning there, the spare bedroom door was wide open, and a voice called out from inside. "Dad!" I stood frozen in the hallway. The room was empty. The air inside was cold. Still, unsettling. Marin brushed it off. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the wind caught the door. Old houses creak. Echo. Breathe. But I knew what I heard. It wasn't just a sound. It was a voice. Soft. Familiar. Like a memory. That night, the dream started. We both had the same one, though neither of us admitted it until later. A little boy standing at the edge of the bed. Pale skin. Shadowed eyes. Saying, "You forgot me." The next morning, the spare room had changed. Subtly. The windows were open, though we hadn't touched them. The closet door, which we always kept shut, was cracked an inch. And on the floor was a small toy car. Red. Scuffed. Not ours. We didn't have children. Never had. At first, we assumed it was left behind by the previous owners. But when we asked the realtor, she hesitated. There haven't been owners since the 90s, she said. The property was inherited, but no one lived there. No children. No families. No reason for a toy to be in that room. Still, we kept finding more. A small blue sock in the laundry. A crayon drawing wedged behind the bathroom mirror. Stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. In the corner, a name. Evan. I started waking up in the hallway, just outside the spare room, unsure how I'd gotten there. Marin said she heard me talking in my sleep. But what really terrified her was when I started referring to our son. I didn't notice at first. I'd say things like, "Evan's gonna need a bigger bed," or "He was crying last night." She thought I was joking. Until one night, I set an extra plate at the table, and I didn't realize what I'd done until she took it away. "You're scaring me," she said. But I didn't feel scared. I felt protective. I started locking the spare room at night. Not to keep something out, but to keep something in. Evan would call to me, whisper through the door, "I'm lonely. You promised you wouldn't leave me again." And the worst part of me remembered making that promise. Marin begged me to leave the house for a few days. Clear my head. But I couldn't. I couldn't leave him. I told her she was free to go. She stared at me, horrified. "We don't have a child," she said. And I told her, without hesitation. "We do now." That night, she packed a bag. She was crying. I didn't stop her. I just watched from the top of the stairs as she left. Evan stood beside me, holding my hand. She never came back. The police said there was no note. Her car was never found. Just gone. Like a vapor. Like she'd never existed. But in the house, things were different. There were new drawings on the walls. Ones I hadn't seen before. Of a stick figure woman with no face, crossed out in red crayon. Evan's room now had clothes. Toys. A lamp that flickered when I said his name. He spoke more clearly now. Laughed when I made pancakes. Cried when I tried to leave the front door. He said the house wouldn't let me go. And I believe him. Because the house knows. It wants this. I've gone through every record I could find. No child named Evan ever lived here. But I found something else. In a newspaper clipping from 1987. A man. Alone. His wife disappeared under unusual circumstances. He claimed they had a son. He was committed weeks later. The photo they printed of him looked exactly like me. And now, I'm beginning to understand. This isn't a haunting. It's a repetition. A loop. A ritual. The house needs a father. A mother. A child. When one piece leaves, another takes its place. And Evan, he's the constant. So if you ever move into a quiet house, deep in the woods, and you hear a little voice calling, "Dad," don't answer. Because once you do, he remembers you, and the house starts to change. When Caleb and Renee moved into the house, the first thing they noticed was how quiet it was. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, more like something was holding its breath. It was an old ranch-style home tucked at the end of a wooded cul-de-sac in northern Vermont, built in the late 1960s, untouched for decades. The kind of place that felt like it had a memory of someone else's life, but they didn't care. It was cheap, remote, perfect for a fresh start. The first night, they didn't even unpack. Just collapsed on an air mattress in the master bedroom and slept. Until 3:13 a.m. That's when Renee sat bolt upright, heart racing, unsure why she was awake. Then she saw it, a sliver of light stretching under the bedroom door. The hallway light. It was on, but they hadn't turned it on. She shook Caleb awake, and he groggily got up, opened the door, and stepped into the hall. Nothing. No one. Just the faint scent of hot dust, like something electrical had just been used. The switch was in the off position. They chalked it up to faulty wiring. It was an old house, after all. But the next night, it happened again. And again. Always at exactly 3:13 a.m. They started leaving their phones on the nightstand to check the time. Every night, the same thing. 3:13 a.m. Light on. Switch still off. Caleb installed a new bulb. New switch. Even had an electrician check the wiring. Nothing was wrong. One night, he waited in the hallway, crouched near the light. He sat there in the dark for an hour, holding his breath. At 3:13 a.m., it clicked on. No sound, no motion, just light. He swore he saw movement just beyond the glow, like someone had just turned the corner. But when he checked, the hallway was empty. Every door closed. Every room still. That's when things started to change. The light wasn't just turning on. It was staying on longer. Renee said it felt brighter than it should. Too white, too sterile. Like hospital lighting. Like a place where bad news is delivered. They began waking up with headaches. Nosebleeds. Caleb started having dreams, though he never remembered them. Just woke up drenched in sweat, chest tight, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Then Renee found the photo. It was wedged behind the hallway light switch plate, wrapped in wax paper. Black and white. Faded. A girl in a white nightgown, standing at the end of the hallway. Face turned away. No date. No markings. She threw it away. That night, at 3:13 a.m., the light didn't just turn on. It buzzed. Like old fluorescence. Sharp. Static. The air smelled like iron. Caleb opened the bedroom door, and the hallway was longer than before. It didn't make sense. The hallway was maybe 15 feet long, but now it stretched deeper, darker. Doors where there hadn't been doors. Wallpaper that hadn't been there earlier. The light flickered overhead. And at the far end, the girl from the photo. Still facing away. Still motionless. He blinked, and the hallway was normal again. Light still on, but the fear lingered in his bones like frostbite. They called the realtor the next morning. She was hesitant, cagey. Said the previous owner was a widower. His daughter had gone missing in the 1970s. Police assumed she'd run away. Her name was Eloise. And yes, the hallway had been remodeled after that. Shortened, the rooms converted. Renee and Caleb didn't sleep that night. Instead, they watched the hallway through the cracked bedroom door. 3:13 a.m. The light clicked on. And this time, it wasn't just a glow. It pulsed, like a heartbeat. The air shimmered, and from the corner of the hallway, something stepped forward. Not quite a girl. Not quite a shadow. It wore the shape of Eloise. The gown. The posture. But its face was stretched, mouth wide, and flickering like a warped VHS tape. No eyes. Just sockets that burned. Caleb slammed the door. They moved out the next day. Left most of their things behind. The photo, the furniture, even the mattress. Everything stayed. They never spoke about it again. But Renee swears, even now, when she wakes up in the middle of the night, she glances at the crack beneath the door, just to make sure there's no light coming through. I rented the house for one reason: silence. After years of living in a noisy apartment sandwiched between screaming neighbors and traffic that never stopped, I needed quiet. The listing promised it: remote country home, perfect for creatives or solitude seekers. No neighbors for miles. Woods on all sides. Full privacy guaranteed. It sounded too perfect, but after the year I'd had, I didn't care. The house was older than I expected. Dust lingered in the corners. The kind of dust that doesn't get there from disuse, but from time. It smelled like cedar and something else. Something stale. Still, the first few days were perfect. I worked during the day and read in the evenings. No city sounds. No interruptions. Just wind in the trees and the occasional creak from the old bones of the house. That was to be expected. But on the fifth night, something changed. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. to what I thought was scratching. Light, rhythmic, like fingernails against wood. I sat up, heart racing. It was probably an animal outside. The forest surrounding the house was thick. Raccoons, maybe even deer. I told myself it was nothing. Still, I checked every door and window. Locked. Sealed. When I lay back down, the scratching had stopped. But the silence felt heavier. Like the house was listening. The next night, it happened again. Same time. Same sound. But this time it came from inside. The walls, I thought. Old plumbing. Maybe even mice. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. That the scratching was deliberate. Intentional. I recorded audio that night, just in case. When I played it back the next morning, the scratching was there, but clearer than I remembered. Slower. Closer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The noise returned at 3 a.m. Sharp. It moved. From one wall to another. Then the ceiling. Then just outside my bedroom door. But when I opened it, the hallway was empty. I left the light on after that. I was starting to dread the nights. The house, once peaceful, had begun to feel alive. And not in a poetic way. In a watching way. On the 9th night, it escalated. I was drifting off, lights still on, when I heard the scratching again. But this time, it wasn't fingernails. It was slower, dragging, like something being pulled across the floor. Heavy. I sat frozen in bed, holding my breath. Then from downstairs, the sound of a single chair scraping across the hardwood. I hadn't moved any furniture. I stayed upstairs until morning. I didn't sleep. I just waited, and when I finally went downstairs, the kitchen chair was facing the hallway. I don't know why that got me so much. Maybe it was the angle, the way it looked like someone had been sitting there, watching the staircase, watching me. The next day, I found a small door in the hallway closet, one I hadn't noticed before. It led to a crawl space. I only opened it a crack before the cold air stopped me. It reeked of something rotten. But inside, I saw something someone had carved into the wood. Over and over again, in uneven handwriting. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. I didn't open it again. I tried staying up all night. Coffee, lights, podcasts. But no matter what I did, I would start drifting sometime after 2:30 a.m. And every time I did, I'd hear the sound, dragging, moving, getting closer. On the 12th night, I heard whispering. I thought it was the wind at first. Then I recognized words. Wake up, wake up, wake up. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the hallway. My feet were cold. My mouth was dry. And behind me, the crawlspace door was open. I hadn't touched it. I didn't sleep at all after that. I kept the lights on. All of them. I even set alarms for every 15 minutes. But no matter what I did, I would blink and hours would pass. Always waking up somewhere different in the house. Sometimes at the top of the stairs. Sometimes in the living room. Once outside, barefoot, shivering, staring at the woods. I called the owner the next morning. She was quiet for a long time before saying, "You weren't supposed to stay past the first night." I asked what that meant. She hung up. I checked the listing again. It was gone. Removed entirely. I searched the address. Nothing. No records. It was like the house didn't exist. I left the next day, packed everything into my car, and drove away without looking back. But now, no matter where I go, I can't sleep. Not really. At 3 a.m. every night, I wake up, sometimes to scratching, sometimes to whispering. And once, I swear I heard a chair move in the other room. Whatever was in that house didn't want me there. But I think it came with me anyway. They told me the house only had one previous owner, a widowed man, quiet, kept to himself. I remember the way the realtor said it, like it was a badge of simplicity. Only one owner since '98, she chirped. No messy history, just old walls and a lot of charm. I should have known better. The house was a 2-story colonial tucked into the edge of an aging neighborhood, half swallowed by trees. The kind of house that looks stuck in time. Shutters slightly crooked, Porch light flickering. Everything slightly still. But I needed out. A fresh start. And this place was affordable in the way that should have set off alarms. I moved in the following week. The first few nights were uneventful, but off. It was subtle, like walking into a room and forgetting why you came. Or like someone had just left a second before you arrived. On the fourth night, I woke up at 3:13 a.m. The exact time. I remember because my phone lit up just before I opened my eyes. There was no sound, no movement, but the hallway light was on. I hadn't turned it on. That was the first time I thought maybe I hadn't moved in alone. The house creaked a lot. Not unusual for a place this old. But these weren't casual shifts in the foundation. This was rhythm. Footsteps. Always upstairs. Always when I was downstairs. I tried brushing it off until I noticed the changes. A picture I never hung. Somehow was hung. A lamp I never plugged in, now working. A book on the coffee table. Open to a chapter one hadn't reached. A single plate in the sink, still wet. I lived alone. I began checking the doors. Locking them. Bolting windows. Setting up cameras. But the footage never showed anything. Just stillness. Except one frame. Just one. From the hallway outside my bedroom. A blurry figure. Face turned toward the camera. Not moving, but somehow closer than it should have been. I paused the video so many times it burned into my eyes. Gray, blurred features, almost like static. I convinced myself it was an error. Some visual glitch. Until I saw it again in the mirror. Just behind me. I turned. Nothing. But the air had weight. Like being watched from inside your own skin. I called the realtor. Demanded to know more. She paused. And then said, "Only one legal owner." What? Legal owner? The phrasing drilled into me. I pressed her. Eventually, she gave in. Apparently, there were tenants. Unofficial. Never on paper. A woman, briefly. Early 2000s. Left without warning. A man, 2 years later. Same story. A couple who only stayed 2 weeks. Then nothing. Until me. That night, I found a key inside the fireplace. Taped behind a loose brick. Old brass, blackened with time. I didn't know what it opened, but I felt like I was meant to find it. The next morning, I tried it on every door. Nothing. Then I remembered the crawl space in the upstairs closet, the one the inspector never got open. The key slid in like it belonged. Inside, it was smaller than I expected. Just dusty insulation and boxes. Dozens of them, labeled with names. Names that weren't mine. Inside each, photos, letters, drawings, voicemails burned on old mini cassettes. All of people I'd never heard of. Except, they looked like they'd lived here. Birthday candles on the kitchen counter. Selfies in the hallway mirror. One photo showed the exact couch I had downstairs, but older. Worn. Stained. Another was taken from the top of the stairs, from behind someone walking down them. Then I found the last box. No label. Just a strip of masking tape. On it, written in black ink. The quiet ones stay longest. Inside was a cracked Polaroid. The photo had almost faded entirely, but I recognized the person in it. It was me, not just someone who looked like me. Me. Same shirt I wore the day I moved in. Same backpack. Same confused expression, looking through the front door. I don't know who took it. I don't know when. The next few days blurred together. Lights flickered constantly. Shadows moved in patterns that didn't match the time of day. I stopped sleeping. The air grew heavy, like breathing through someone else's lungs. One night, the hallway light clicked on again at 3:13 a.m. But this time, the door at the end was open. I don't have a door at the end of the hall. It shouldn't exist. I walked toward it, against every instinct. Inside was a staircase. Narrow, leading down, farther than the house should go. The further I stepped, the quieter it got. Like sound itself didn't reach that far. At the bottom, another door. Same brass keyhole. I still had the key in my pocket. I stood there for a long time, listening, and then I turned around. But there were no stairs behind me anymore. Just wall. That was 3 days ago. Or at least, I think it was. Time doesn't move down here, and the quiet is getting louder. If you find this recording, don't believe the realtor. This house didn't just have one owner. It collects them,